My fellow citizens and residents, I speak to you today at a time when we are all very anxious and concerned about the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic that is creating crises around the world. While we here in St. Kitts-Nevis await the announcement of any known case, we should nonetheless be aware that it is only a matter of time. Therefore, it is extremely important and urgent that we prepare ourselves and we be ready, not just for preventative measures, but we have to make sure that we would be able to detect, manage, and contain the transmission of this very contagious virus. We are all aware that developments in relation to the spread of the deadly virus are changing rapidly, virtually by the minute, as countries around the world try to cope with its effects, not just on the public health system, but the economic, social, and economical impacts as well. Just recently, in North America, as well as in the Caribbean region, heads of government have made announcements and issued a number of guidelines about what is needed to prevent and manage the transmission of the disease. We need to ensure that we follow the best practices that are being used worldwide. The health and economic impact of this pandemic on St. Kitts and Nevis will be immense and expansive. It has already affected our tourism industry and services sectors. It will continue to affect businesses, especially our small businesses, our state institutions, our schools, our government offices, and more importantly, it can overwhelm our health institutions and our health system. To address this pandemic effectively and minimize its adverse effects, we must approach this together, all of us as citizens and residents. This pandemic does not care about your political affiliation. It does not care about your ethnicity or whether you are a resident or a citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis. It cares not whether you are rich or poor, able or disabled. What is needed here today is a unified approach, setting aside all political and ideological differences and coalescing around a common and agreed strategy. And so that is why last week we called on the government to take a whole of government and whole of society approach by establishing a national COVID-19 task force. And we indicated our readiness and our willingness to work with the authorities, to work with the private sector and all social partners in order to save lives and to protect our dear people. We repeat today our call for our government to set up this national task force consisting of experts from the infectious disease and medical fraternity, civil society, and business community in order to develop a comprehensive national approach to address this particular issue. We as a responsible party, we have ideas, as we suspect other groups have, as to the way in which this matter should be handled. There are numerous steps and measures which have already been announced in other jurisdictions, which may be considered here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Perhaps the most important of these is the measure of social distancing. We must break the chain of transmission of any case that is among us already. This is essential, and we must practice social distancing in our daily lives in order to overcome this crisis. We here urge the Harris administration, and the Prime Minister in particular, to be proactive and forthright in addressing the people about the specific preparations that are being made and the protocols that are being followed. Each of us must play our part. Personal hygiene is key in preventing the spread of the coronavirus. Therefore, we should all practice the following, and I remind you of these as a medical doctor myself. 1, wash our hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds, especially after using the bathroom and before eating. 2, we should cough into a tissue or flex our elbow. 3, we should avoid touching our faces, our eyes, our nose and mouth with unwashed hands. 4, we should avoid handshakes. 5, we should avoid large crowds and practice social distancing. 6, we should clean and disinfect frequently objects and surfaces that are touched very often. 7, we should self-monitor and call the doctor's office if we are feeling unwell. 8, we should use hand sanitizers with high alcohol content of at least 60%. And so I remind you that these simple tips can save our lives, many, many lives. We commend all the institutions which have taken steps to practice social distancing. And while we take these personal steps and institutional steps to implement these guidelines, there is still a need for a national conversation to address the institutional and economic fallout from this pandemic. The first and most immediate step that must be taken is to ensure that our health system is well resourced and equipped with the right technologies, well-trained staff. There is a critical need for more ventilators, respirators, and ICU equipment. Our healthcare practitioners will be severely impacted, especially our doctors, our nurses, our cleaners, and emergency personnel who will be at the front line of this fight. There might be a need to recall some of our retired nurses in order to assist with efforts, and I hope that they would respond appropriately. There is a desperate need for a hotline linked to the critical health personnel where people can give and receive information. Where there are gaps and shortcomings, we are asking that the government seek help from our friends and partners in Taiwan, in Cuba, and around the Caribbean region, which can provide the additional technical, logistical, and material and technological support. Then, of course, there is the financial and economic impact. There is no doubt that every citizen and resident will be affected. The closing of our schools and our daycare centers, for example, will impact our parents. It will impact the closing of our businesses. They will impact our employees and the many people who depend on their goods and services. The announcement by the cruise ships to suspend their itineraries in the Caribbean region will adversely affect our taxi drivers, our restaurant workers, and the thousands who work in our hotel and tourism sector. In light of the loss of employment, we are urging the government of St. Kitts-Nevis to explore measures that would provide income support to our vulnerable citizens who will be disproportionately affected by the economic impact of this pandemic. We are calling on the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, for example, to institute price controls for a limited period to prevent price gouging on essential goods and items. Our businesses, they should seek to provide online options for purchasing and delivery of goods and services. We also hope that at the time of recovery from this crisis, appropriate stimulus measures will be instituted to assist our businesses, small and large. We would like to encourage our local banks to suspend payments on mortgages and student and other loans, and to put a moratorium on penalties and late fees. In the short term, we would like to urge the Harris administration to consider implementing a form of unemployment insurance that would provide a weekly, fortnightly, or monthly stipend for individuals who may have lost their jobs as a result of downsizing, particularly those in the tourism and manufacturing sectors. Our people must be given the assurance that they will not be thrown out of their homes, their businesses will not be foreclosed on, and students won't lose their student loans and have to return from universities. A rationing system may be needed, we are told, so that we can ensure that we do not run out of food and other essential goods. This is a time for all of our nationals, I should say, and our nation to come together, for our communities to come together, and for us all to be our brother's keeper. We must resist this natural instinct to look inward as to what we must do to secure the survival of ourselves and our own families. This is not the Kitts-Nevis way. And so I urge us all, I urge us to be considerate of others, and to look out for those who are most vulnerable among us, the homeless, the mentally challenged, the elderly, and our shut-ins, to ensure that they too are coping during this crisis. And even our youths must remember that you can be vulnerable as well. We are a resilient people, and we shall overcome this latest challenge, but it will take discipline and adapting our way of life to the new order. It is my hope, my fervent hope, that rising to a new normal will elevate all humanity to a new way of life and social economic interaction that is much more balanced, much more empathic, fairer, and compassionate. My thoughts and prayers, my fellow citizens and residents, are with you. We of this proud country, St. Kitts-Nevis, we are banded together as we go through this pending crisis together. Let us, therefore, recognize that this is a moment that will challenge us as a people. May God bring us through this together. Thank you.